Hello and welcome to the West Ham Breakdown with me, Jack Alderton, and my mate Cam Goodall, in a week where West Ham were defeated 1-0 by Newcastle. The end to the incredible winning streak. the 5-3-2 fixed all of our problems until Newcastle turned up. Cal was there, I wasn't. We've had a busy week our end, so Cal was the only person able to attend. What was it like in the ground watching what we have to say was a pretty flat football match?
Yeah, it was cold, I'll tell you that much. It was very cold. I've got a real sniffle today, having been sat up there for the best part of 2 and a bit hours. But I would say perhaps it's not unusual for the stadium to be like this, particularly on a game under the floodlights. But I'd say the atmosphere sort of ebbed and flowed. I think it was largely quite loud at the start, probably more so than usual, and I guess that comes off the back of the Antonio sort of ceremony, fans being up for it, and again, like I say, late night crowds just generally seem to get more up for it. Then it's sort of the first 10 minutes were loud because of the chances that we had early on, I guess, and there was a sort of intensity that we played with in those opening 15 minutes, and I think for that short spell it felt like we were the team in the ascendancy. And then obviously as the performance dropped off and Newcastle wrestled control of the game for the following half hour, it really was quite flat, and then sort of copy and paste that for the second half, I guess. At the start we came back with a new intensity, came out of the traps, and the fans got behind, and then I think the goal sort of galvanised to an extent. But I think what was probably had more of a galvanising factor, which is typical West Ham, is that the referee gave a few dubious decisions, and then Newcastle compounded that by time wasting in a fashion that did not please a lot of the fans. I mean, if West Ham were winning 1-0 and we were doing it, we'd obviously be completely fine with it. It's just a tactical thing and it's part of the game. But yeah, I think that combined with the refereeing performance, particularly the penalty shout and a few decisions about whether the ball went out or whether it didn't go out for corners and throws, really seemed to get the fans on the team's back, but in a good way. But obviously it didn't manage to see them over the line. I think it did sort of buoy us onto a couple more chances towards the end of the game, but yeah, not quite enough to find that elusive equaliser. But yeah, it was louder than it's been this season, but still a super frustrated crowd. And you get the classic sort of groans whenever we're passing it around the back 1-0 down. West Ham fans famously just want to see that ball move forward, which is, yeah, maybe not like something anyone. We'll see that often.
like anyone,
yeah, of
to
course.
Be fair. I think it's a shame, isn't it? Because after the last two results and going into a night match at home, I think it's really builds some excitement there, and you want to convert on what's happening. And to be honest, I think any discussion about this match, we have to start with at least an acknowledgement of how well Newcastle played out of possession and how well they managed the game, maybe beyond that first couple of minutes that were a little bit chaotic, and maybe were a little bit more what we wanted to try and create at the start. From that point onwards, I think we have to just credit how well they did out of possession to neutralise a lot of the strengths that we've seen previously from the way in which we've been playing in the last couple of games.
Yeah, 100%. I think we'll obviously break it down in a bit more detail in a bit, but I think my initial sort of appraisal coming out of the game was that whereas the shape that we've been using, the 5-3-2, has worked in the previous couple of games, it's primarily been because of the sort of nature of the opposition midfields. I think against Leicester it was more of a 2 with a 10, and then with Arsenal it's obviously a 3 on paper, but it's not a flat 3, and it kind of oscillates between a 1-2 and a 2-1, and I think that makes it easier for our flat 3 to sort of win a lot of those battles, whereas I think with Newcastle, obviously not completely throughout the game, but the way that Tonali, Guimaraes and Joe Linton sort of operated, it was very much a 3-on-3 battle rather than 3v2s or 2v3s. And I think ultimately, as has been the case a number of times when we've come up against that midfield combination, the one thing they're incredibly good at is matching and often outdoing physicality, which is kind of where our only strength lies in the midfield at the moment, because it's certainly not progression. And as soon as you sort of start to lose that physical battle, it's quite easy to get overrun and struggle to string passes together in the middle of the park, which I think was a big factor in why we weren't able to get things going for large parts of the game.
Yeah, and the other thing I think we need to do at the top of the pod is talk about kind of differentiation between bad games and bad performances. Like, I don't think either of us were enamored with the way that we played in this game. I don't think either of us think that this was a particularly excellent performance. It was not. I think it's quite clear, and we'll talk about this as we go through. We didn't find enough quality in the game. We didn't show enough quality in the game. But I would agree with the manager's assessment afterwards that the effort was absolutely there. The willingness to run for each other, the willingness to work hard out of possession. The way that we defended with bodies, with numbers, to try and make it difficult for Newcastle to create chances, and it was difficult for Newcastle to create chances for the vast majority of the game. The way that we managed Isak, I think we did a lot of things really well in the game. We just didn't show enough quality with the ball ourselves to really convert any of that kind of good base level work into more for us in the match. And therefore I think it's really, really important to differentiate in that way and say, okay, yeah, we didn't show much quality here. We did a lot of the good base level stuff and showed a good kind of the fundamentals were mostly strong and competed well with Newcastle. That created a kind of poor match because you've got one team that's working really well out of possession high with intensity that made it difficult for us in our build-up phase, made it difficult for us to play through, and another team that was working really well low with bodies to make it difficult to break into the box. So it kind of neutralized a lot of what both teams wanted to do to kind of be exciting and create opportunities within the game, and led to what was I have to say, quite a poor football match, but not really a reflection of the overall performance from either side, just perhaps more a reflection of the physical challenge in this game and how both teams kind of, I think, both like to play in a way that makes it, particularly out of possession, makes it very difficult for the opposition to feel fluent and strong in any moment of the game. And we've seen that. We saw that against Arsenal, and I think a lot of the execution in this game, not quite as good in that game, but was still definitely acceptable. I mean, it's a 1-0 loss against a team chasing Champions League football with a striker that's been in irrepressible form of late, who frankly struggled to get into goal scoring positions or creative positions for his team. So I think that has to go at the top. Now we can kind of break into the detail a little bit. We talked around Newcastle's press. We have to talk about Newcastle's press now and say one of the big strengths of the shape that we've been playing is the number of bodies we're able to get in deep areas to circulate the ball. It's helped us a lot. I think one of the weaknesses we obviously have had this season is with goalkeeper and not being able to play out particularly well using the goalkeeper. So having an extra centre-back has given us an extra body in that area to feel more comfortable when we're on the ball, to feel less pressured, and to be able to play out, or at least have more extended periods of possession in games. Yeah, Newcastle just completely killed that off, basically from minute 3, in minute 2, minute 3 in the game. The 3 forwards went out onto our 3 centre-backs, the 3 midfielders went up onto our 3 midfielders. And then dependent on which side the ball was on, the fullback would commit all the way up onto our wing-back, whether that's Trippier to Scholes or Livramento to Wan-Bissaka, and suddenly presented without that number, that extra body coming from an outfield player, and actually the extra body being Areola, we really saw how difficult it is for us to kind of to control a match and to have possession when we're looking to the goalkeeper to kind of maybe take an extra beat on the ball, invite pressure, and then find a spare outfield player. Because, well, I mean, that didn't happen, did it? All game long.
No, unfortunately not. And I think, yeah, more and more it becomes obvious that is kind of going to be the crux of anything that we try and do and build up, really. It kind of feels boring to keep talking about it, but it was so pointed in this match that it's wrong not to mention it. And I think it's kind of the root of not just our build up, but a lot of our other issues that we saw throughout the game as well. Because it kind of all starts at the back, right? As you've nicely alluded to there, the idea that we have to sort of almost overcompensate by putting an extra body back there to sort of cover up the issues of Areola means that's one less body further up the field to commit to rotations, and that's kind of a reason why we struggle around the box, because we've got what could be a midfielder in a deeper area, right? And
although I think the only thing we should just jump in and say there is there are obviously other reasons for that as well. It's us having an extra defender in the team at the moment isn't just because we're having issues or we've had issues in build up with the goalkeeper.
Because we conceded shitloads of goals in the games that came up to it. Yeah.
Exactly. These two things work in tandem with each other. One, we're able to defend much better in settled defensive play when we're defending our box and defending our own third, and two, we're able to maybe have a little bit more of the ball in periods of the match, or have a little bit more controlled play, or find ourselves under a little bit less pressure when we're trying to build out in moments. And those two things go hand in hand with each other.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And it's not me saying it doesn't make sense at all. I think it makes perfect sense. It's a fact that if we didn't have to do that, then we could have the goalkeeper between the two centre-backs, and then you've got an extra target for the centre-backs to find, where I think one of the big issues that we saw in this game was that there wasn't really enough out balls for them to access when they did have the ball, or players didn't feel comfortable playing to the few out balls that they had because they were so limited, and therefore the likelihood of them pulling it off is reduced. And I think the other major issue is that if you are going to have to play this way, and you have got a goalkeeper that's not massively comfortable in those scenarios, and you are going to be forced into going long, then what you do need is an out ball at the top of the pitch. And I think that is another thing that we really struggled with, right? We're playing with Bowen and Kudus up top, neither of whom I think you would qualify as target men. And they really struggled, particularly in those battles with Dan Burn in particular, but also Fabian Schär, which I know that in the preview we highlighted the fact that his aerial duel success was something for us to target. But I think the difference is that he's often competing with Chris Woods and all of those sort of prototypical centre forwards in the Premier League at the minute, which is having an impact on his aerial duel success, not two wingers that have decided they have to play up front at the minute. So that is obviously a slightly different circumstance. I think we saw some sort of efforts to try and mitigate against that by pushing Souček and Alvarez up, but we were talking throughout the game to each other, obviously virtually because we weren't in the same place, but we both felt as though it was nice that we saw it, but probably didn't see it enough throughout the game for it to actually have any real impact.
I think there are a couple of things that we didn't see enough. The only person I do want to give a little bit of smidge of credit to is I think Kudus did handle some of those duels a little bit better than others. Took the ball down on his chest a couple of times.
Yeah, he read the bounce well a lot as well. I think he managed to push off the defender to the point that it forced the bounce, and then he'd quite often land underneath it and win the foul, or be able to knock it into his path. And
obviously the easier assignment against Schär, who has had there's no kind of way to qualify. He's had a poor season this season. On specifically on aerial duels, it's not gone particularly well for him this season in the air, and it's not his strongest suit as a player. He's in the Newcastle team and does lots of other things that are really good for them. And one moment that I particularly liked, where we got caught in the press in a moment, and Souček kind of came inside the pitch to try and cover because Ward-Prowse and Alvarez had jumped up, and he went, "Well, that's great. I'm just now going to spin the ball out to Tino Livramento." No problem. Like, that's what he's in the team for. Really good identification of how the other team is pressing and where the spare man is, and kind of not the same sort of player as maybe a Joachim Andersen, but the same kind of solutions for the team in being able to play out in those situations. Not so strong under the high ball, and Kudus was able to find a little bit of success there. Also, Edson Alvarez, I think, had some good moments kind of joining the front line and winning aerials, but absolutely very clear that we lacked a target man to be able to find success when under so much pressure in our own third and forced to go long. Obviously, then you do need a big number 9 presence at the top of the pitch to really find true success in those situations, and we didn't have that. The other thing you can do is maybe find some creative ways to play out. We talked about that in the preview, a show we do every single week over on Patreon. It's kind of the core thing that we do over there. Build through and do a PMP, which pretty much pack, which looks at the opposition, the things that they do well, the things that they don't do so well, and then translate that to a preview and talk about, okay, how can our players exploit these little weaknesses, these little things that the opposition don't do particularly well. And the big thing we spoke about was the sort of front two working in tandem to try and create some depth, to try and pull that back line a little bit deeper, and to create maybe some space in behind Joelinton if Joelinton's going to come high in the pressing moments, or maybe some space behind Tonali or Guimaraes, basically between the midfield and the defence. And then that would rely a lot on clever movement from our number 8s in Alvarez and Souček. I think there were many things kind of in the chain that went wrong there. I think we possibly didn't have the confidence to play to our wing backs when they were coming under well-timed pressure, and I think it really played into Newcastle's hands, that perhaps they had better and more direct and dynamic and just a quicker player in Tino Livramento arriving with the right timing on Wan-Bissaka, who has been vital to our progression of late in this shape, and just in terms of us getting the ball up the pitch, he's been so important. And I think we saw plenty of situations in the game where Areola maybe could have played Todibo, or maybe when Todibo could have played Wan-Bissaka, but there was that little bit of hesitancy of, I can see Livramento coming like a train. Yeah. I don't necessarily want to invite a situation where we might lose the ball in our own third. We are focusing on maybe making sure we're in games and we're staying in games and we're not conceding silly goals, and that's giving us a better platform to be competitive for longer in matches. So a little bit of hesitancy to play in those moments. I think it's then very difficult to play through if you're not actually playing to someone who's drawing the press and then creating that space, right? Because that's fundamental to being able to find space on the pitch and play through, especially when you have a lot of sort of more smaller players in the front line. And then on the other side, I think Scarles had some really good moments on the ball, but I don't think we were able to find the same quality of kind of rotation on that side of the pitch, or the same ability from Scarles as Wan-Bissaka has shown in recent games to kind of receive the ball, invite pressure, and then dribble past someone and carry the ball 20 yards. That wasn't quite so much what we got on the left side. So I think it made it a little bit easy for Newcastle in their press. Couple of other moments, I think, Ward-Prowse on a handful of occasions did what he does really well for the most part in this game, which is, he's not a hugely progressive player, but he'll receive the ball off the centre-backs. They shut him down brilliantly. We knew they would. It was Tonali rather than Guimaraes. She was just up on him every single time, made it very difficult for him to kind of control matches as he control the game as he did against Leicester. But still, in a couple of moments when we get through and the press isn't coming and you have a moment to kind of have the ball facing forward, now let's try and play forward or stay on the ball or carry the ball up the pitch that 5 yards and see what happens if we can draw pressure, instead of playing to a centre-back, setting the press, letting Isak go, and then we find ourselves kind of going back to the keeper and going long. So I think that would be probably one of my slight complaints there. And then kind of same goes for Souček and Alvarez. We're going to come on and talk about second half changes, just finding that just the first touch, the ability to turn, maybe when someone has found you in a pocket of space, not always quite there. There were a couple of situations, I think Souček particularly one where we managed to break through into a 4v4 type situation. Souček received the ball, and his first touch, he just bounced up off of him, sort of 10 yards up in the air, and then bounced across sort of back towards the halfway line to Wan-Bissaka. If he'd managed to take that on the turn, it's a really good situation for Bowen, who was 1v1 in behind against Fabian Schär. All he would have had to have done would play a one-touch pass into Wan-Bissaka. Even if he'd taken a touch and then played the pass, probably still would have been time to release Bowen in behind. So just these little moments of quality and the understanding of where to move and how to create space when the press is so intense and when it's so well executed, as we have to admit it definitely was with Newcastle. We've got a couple of things to pick up on with the out of possession shape, but I'm going to take a little break there and then we'll talk out of possession and then what happened in the second half. So moving on to things without the ball, we actually did another thing that we picked up on in the preview and thought would be an adaptation in this game, which was that from the 5-3-2, rather than having the wing backs jump out against Newcastle's fullbacks, we thought the game might go a little bit better if we saw Souček and Alvarez jumping to those places. And that's definitely what we saw in the first half. Alvarez going out to Trippier and Souček going out to Livramento. I have to admit, even though it looked good on paper, and it clearly looked good on paper to the coaches as well, because it's what we started doing in the game, it didn't really work.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, and I still stand by the principle. I think it in theory it should work because it's not so dissimilar to. Obviously, it's a slight difference, but not hugely dissimilar to the way that they were looking to press us. Really, it's making sure that we maintain coverage on their wide players with our wing backs and avoiding those sort of 2v1 situations opening up and freeing the ball side 8 to go. But I think the difference is that, I mean, it might be a simplification, but frankly, Souček and Alvarez just can't move quickly enough to get there on time. It's far too easy. Almost the Newcastle players can bait the press because they're like, well, I know that it's going to take you longer than other Premier League midfielders to arrive, so I can let you come a certain distance, and then once you get within my radius, I'll just play it off, and then we'll play through. And it was, the right idea, but I think a lot has been made about the need or Graham Potter's need for slightly more dynamic, slightly faster midfielders. And I think this is probably the most obvious example that we've seen so far since he's arrived as to why those profiles are fundamental to enabling his systems, or his ideas rather, because the systems change week in, week out, but his principles to function. And unfortunately, if you can't rely on your central midfielders to press aggressively, then you are sort of hamstrung in your approach from the offset.
Yeah, it felt like we sent our press with a second-class stamp, and they sent theirs.
Yeah,
by
24-hour tracked and signed, bro. It wasn't even first class.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
like the 749 one.
Yeah, the difference between, you've already highlighted it, but just to talk about the player specifically, the difference between Guimaraes and Joelinton and the speed with which they were able to arrive versus Souček and Alvarez was really very obvious in the game. And I think that's where we see one press functioning really well and Newcastle controlling a lot of the ball and a lot of the game in the first half, and one press, frankly, not functioning particularly well, and one team often forced to defend a little bit deeper for long periods. I think it would be fair to say of the first half, which again then does not work in tandem with what we have in the front line in this specific game against this specific opposition, because they're not going to leave themselves with two. They leave themselves with three on the back line. With two, I think we maybe would have found a few more opportunities on the outside against someone like Byrne, maybe, big diag out to Bowen or something like that. I think we said again in the preview that if the game took this shape, it could become a bit of a case of kind of waiting for Newcastle to score, because getting out in those situations, and we saw lots of them, those diag balls out towards Curtis Bowen, you just have a lot of sort of Trippier mopping that up or Byrne mopping that up, because they're able to get that width either side of Cher. It became really difficult for us to really get any counter-attacks going, which you can't then interrupt the field. You can't change the feel in the ground. You can't bring the fans on side. And again, it's not for any lack of trying. There's a group of players working really hard out there to try and make things happen. But I think, there's just a difference in athleticism in the two units. That means when you try and imprint those ideas on Newcastle's group, there's just a different delivery to what you can get from our group of players. To bring us on to second half changes, that did change at half time, and instead of us using those eights to go out to the fullbacks, we actually saw more from the wing backs, and particularly from Ollie Scholes, who pushed really, really high in the press. We saw him sort of reap the rewards, if you like, going down with cramp and really struggling in the last 5-10 minutes of the game, because boy did he work hard in the sort of first half an hour of the second half, pushing out as aggressively as possible, high in the press. We saw Newcastle kind of some interesting responses from Newcastle. A moment where Trippier, or a couple of moments where Trippier kind of went into a sort of double pivot in midfield to sort of get away from that pressure and to free maybe Tonali over to the left side a bit and allow him to kind of crash forwards in moments. I actually think, though Newcastle did try and find different ways to respond to it, it helped us get a little bit more control of the game in the second half. Obviously before the Newcastle goal, a lot more possession, extended periods on the ball, more success when pressing. There were a couple of moments where Pope kind of had to just shank one out, which, we know Nick Pope does love one of those, but we managed to force that a little bit more. And I feel that although we weren't able to, again, show the quality on the ball that we perhaps needed to in those moments in the second half, where he managed to find a little bit more success out of possession and find a little bit more kind of territory and possession in the game. There are at least some nice signs that when you adapt from the eights to the wing backs, at times against some opposition, perhaps not Newcastle because of how athletically strong they are, that approach using the eights to press is going to work absolutely fine. And then in games like this, maybe we do need to be a little bit more aggressive with the wing backs and use maybe more Souček and Alvarez as kind of cover players, use more of Souček kind of covering into more of like a fullback position, which he does very well. It's nice to know that at least we can do that and we can adapt to something slightly different and find a little bit more success, even if we're struggling in a game to kind of match the level of intensity and speed in the middle. Yeah,
100%, and especially when one of the players that is central to that is an academy product, right? It's been great to see his development. It was funny, the injury, because I think it happened basically on the stroke of Danny Ings just about to come on, I think, and I was like, could you not have just maybe waited 1 minute to see if Ollie needed to come off? Like, we feel a bit screwed now because that was our last sub, and we've just used it while Ollie is lying on the ground asking for the physio to come over. So yeah, that was quite a funny moment. The Newcastle analysts that were sat next to us were having a bit of a chuckle to themselves. But yeah, fair play to him. I mean, he got up and managed to play through for the rest of the game. So yeah, my hat goes off to him. But yeah, it's nice to have those options, and I think, like you say, we're talking about the eights pressing not working, but it is worth sort of having that caveat, like you say, that Newcastle are not every team in the Premier League, and whilst it is a fact that Souček and Alvarez are slow, there are going to be games, as you say, where they'll be more than fine, largely because we'll probably in other games play a higher line, which means their starting position is a lot closer to the player that they're trying to press anyway, right?
Yeah, not every team is going to worry us in the same way with Isak and Barnes to go. And Murphy's been in great form as well of late, so I should mention him too. You know, that front three to go in behind causes a little bit of anxiety in our back line. Maybe everyone starts a little bit deeper. It exacerbates the problems that we're talking about, and that's not going to be the case every single week in the Premier League. Everyone has quality, but qualities are different, and maybe there's not the same. You know, even against Brentford with their incredible pace in the front line, you maybe have a bit more of a chance of mixing it in the middle. Janelt, Norgard, not Damsgaard, not quite the same kind of profile as Newcastle just do and have built a squad that is incredibly good at going up and down for 90 minutes against anyone and not really having too much of an issue in the physical battle. Yeah,
100%, and it seems to be the order of the season, right? It's every team that is having success. Newcastle's different because it's been a fairly consistent theme of their side, but increasingly the teams that are punching above their weight, Bournemouth, Forest,
Elliot Anderson.
Just him. It's funny, isn't it? Really,
from Newcastle.
That they let him go, because he would have been a perfect addition. Well, not addition because he was already there, but you get what I'm trying to say.
He would have fit in exactly to what they're trying to do.
100%. But yeah, I think it seems to be the direction that the league is heading in. Something that you forecast for a while, so I'll give you some credit there. But yeah, sometimes it's obviously not okay to lose. It's never okay to lose, but I think the main takeaway is that sometimes there are teams that are going to be better than you at some things, and if you allow them to wrestle control and play the game on their terms, which I think we kind of were guilty of doing in this game, in part because of the personnel that we had available, as we've discussed. We didn't actually have a focal point, but we were forced into playing a way that required a focal point because of how good their press was. Then ultimately they are going to come out on top. And I think, it's important to remember that it really was just one sort of fortunate ball over the top. Well, not fortunate. It was a great pass. It
deserved to win the game. It was the best moment of quality that we saw all game long.
Yeah, it was a delicious ball. But fortunate in the set. Although I don't know, I don't really want to talk about the decisions because I think it's a shit reactionary point. But we were in the press conference, and therefore we should raise it. But Potter was very adamant that the goal shouldn't have stood in his press conference. He felt as though there was a foul in the build-up.
What did you think? Both of the foul and the penalty. Just interested to hear what the penalty shout.
I think they're both difficult. I think the goal probably should have been chalked off by the letter of the law, but I haven't watched it back, I must say. But I think my one issue is that I wasn't convinced by the flight of the ball that Kilman actually gets his head on it anyway, because he looked to be quite a way off, even with the nudge. So it felt like we were clutching a bit. But then also I'm kind of like, you're a 6'5" centre back. Like, come on, stand your ground with it, or sort your position out. Although I know a nudge from behind when you can't see it is difficult. It's going to throw you off anyway,
especially because he's backpedaling to try and get into position to make that header.
But yeah, I don't know. I with the penalty, I think I kind of watched the replay and was like, I don't think that gets given. It was contact, but it was one of those where it was like just a bit of an unfortunate tangle between several players, and I think refs would be hard pressed to give that. I'm sure Jack's gonna disagree though.
No, I actually completely agree. I think I was laughing because I think we're a tough crowd. We both need more, I think, to be convinced in these situations. And I think I would feel disappointed if we'd scored that goal and it had been chalked off. Not because I don't think it is a foul by the letter of the law, but I think if the ref sees it and doesn't give it, then I'm not interested in VAR getting involved on something like that. It's certainly not clear or obvious to me that should be considered a foul. If the ref considers that fair contact in the box, then I'm happy to accept that. It's a very subjective decision. For some people it will be, for some people it won't be, and therefore I'm happy to go with whatever the ref thinks in those moments, because like I say, if it was up the other end, I'd want us to get it given us a goal, and if it's our end, I want it to be a foul, right? It's one of those ones where it's really, really 50-50. The penalty shout, I think we're maybe just being a little bit unfortunate on those, just not quite getting the first decision, because I think, again, it's kind of the same. If you get it given by the ref on the pitch, there's no way that's getting overturned. Yeah. We're just not getting those given at the moment. Do I want those kind of things to be given as penalties? Probably not, but we do see them given quite often in the Premier League, and I think we maybe have been a tad unfortunate in the last few games that those moments haven't quite gone for us. A lot of the 50-50, big 50-50 decisions, not small 50-50, big game-changing 50-50 decisions haven't quite gone for us. And really, over much of the time that Potter's been here, I think we had a penalty shout at Chelsea as well? Really good penalty shout for Bowen in that game too. So just a slight bit of misfortune in terms of you need that. In football, you need that. If you can get the rub of the green in those,
especially in these
moments,
games where it's been kept so tight, it's a game of moments.
Exactly, absolutely. So I wouldn't say I'm fuming, but I'd like to see maybe one of them go for us at some point, you know.
If you're listening, Pugmall or whatever.
yeah, exactly. Look, let's breeze through some stuff that we saw in the second half, and then talk about kind of sort of major takeaways from the game. I don't think there's a huge amount to drag out of the second half, to be honest. I think the main thing that's interesting to talk about is Lucas Paqueta, how he impacted the team, what happens now that he's back. And we have a whole second show that we do after this. Cal goes off and, does fun stuff. I think you're playing football tonight, aren't you?
Side, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And the three of us, me, Charlie, Darcy, we sit and we look at the next big talking points, and we also talk about individual performances. So there's some really interesting bits to talk about on there. Ward-Prowse, Wan-Bissaka in this game, Kilman in this game, Ferguson's performance off the bench, and Paqueta notably, as well as some of the players on the list for tonight, which we'll be recording immediately after this, and that'll be up on Patreon. And we'll also be talking about what happens now that Paqueta's back. How does it change the shape? What do we do to try and fit him back in? Because of all the players that came on in that second half, I do think he made quite a big positive impact on the game and helped us create some pressure towards the end, although it was incredibly disjointed, and the game was sort of madly disjointed in the final sort of 5-10 minutes, including stoppage time. His individual performance, particularly this one, that one moment where he kind of dropped to right back, received the ball, and then threaded a really lovely pass through the entirety of the Newcastle midfield for Danny Ings, who then passed it off to, I think it was Wan-Bissaka on the right hand side. It might have been Bowen at that point, actually, because Wan-Bissaka had kind of gone back in to be part of the three in build-up. You could see how much we've missed him in those kind of areas, and particularly compared to the first half, the sort of the 2-8s that we started with versus the two that then came on, Soler and Paqueta, the difference in terms of being able to find a little bit more quality to play through in moments.
Yeah, and I think whilst we've spent a lot of time bemoaning Paqueta sometimes, I think, because of that directness in games like this, particularly in game states like this, where you're 1-0 down and Newcastle are more happy to defend their box, which I think they actually did really, really well when they needed to. Something that Howe pointed out as well ahead of the final that he was very happy to see. But yeah, I think you do need someone like Paqueta. Whilst he's not perfect, he probably is the best option we have to unlock those kind of defences. And we see it right away, right? Almost instantaneously when he nearly wins the penalty for Bowen by popping that ball over the top, something that we hadn't seen done at all in the first half, really, when we had moments of possession.
And of course, saw straight away as soon as he comes on the pitch, because he bloody loves that ball.
Yeah. Yeah, was it last season, the Luton goal? It was that, but from a slightly deeper area, right? It was just poked over towards the back post, Bowen on the run. But yeah, and then I think probably more crucially, I would say, as you've rightly referenced, the sort of his ability to just help link defensive third to middle third and then transition into the final third. Whereas I think for the first half, definitely it was kind of just a lot of, what is the middle third? Let us play over the middle third, for the middle third does not exist. Whereas as soon as Paqueta came on, it was like, whoa. You know, like when you reach a certain level and you unlock part of a map in an RPG, it's like, wow, we're now allowed to enter here. We've brought on a high-level player and we can go through this door because he's got good lockpick skills. And yeah, that is Paqueta. He is lockpick maxed out, but unfortunately wasn't able to find the perfect moment. But yeah, it does make it function a lot more. I, for one, will definitely be tuning into extra time as well, because I think it does raise a really, really interesting question. Because I think it's difficult to know where to put him if you keep this shape exactly the same, in my opinion, because I just don't think putting him in a flat midfield three really gets the best out of him. And then you're sort of talking about shuffling around the whole defence. So that'll be a really interesting debate. But yeah, good to have him back, and good to see him make an immediate impact. Clearly well liked by Potter and trusted as well to take on that sort of responsibility.
Couple of tiny notes from me with the changes. I think I would have maybe liked to have seen 3-4 minutes extra of the 5-3-2 with the different eights before Ferguson came on. I was surprised that we made the triple change and then straight away brought Ferguson on after that. I think things were better already with the same shape and the two fresh midfielders. We had fresh energy, we had fresh impetus with the ball, we had a bit more quality. It's immediately a moment where I think it's I can't remember if it was Paqueta dummying for Soler, but we played through and one of them dummied for the other, and then there was a nice kind of interchange there, and I thought, okay, cool. Let's kind of see what happens here, where we can still commit the wing backs, where we can still get Wan-Bissaka into really dangerous positions, because he has been in really good form in recent games, and I'd like to see maybe him be able to be active in those areas a little bit more for us in this period. But we kind of straight away changed, and then Bowen kind of became the width holder, got out of areas in which he is more dangerous as a goal scorer. Wan-Bissaka became part of the defence, and there were some good things in there, but I felt like it lacked poke, and we didn't really create enough in wide areas. I think Scholes and Bowen really struggled to add much quality in the moments where they receive wide. I think big tick in Joe Linton's column. If you've got the two against each other, I think Joe Linton covering the fullback out into the wide areas, doubling up and just giving Bowen a really tough time in those areas, I think did really, really well. It's a pain always playing against him. You always feel like he should have been booked about half an hour before he has been booked, if not an hour before he has been booked, or if maybe just booked at all.
Book him before he comes on. Just book him before he gets on, before that whistle goes.
Because he loves a foul. But yeah, he did a really, really good job of sort of shutting us down on that side of the pitch. And then there was a lot of pressure on a tired Ollie Scholes to kind of bring the moment of quality that unlocked the defence. And I think Newcastle knew that things were maybe leaning slightly in their favour if the one bit of space that they're willing to concede is for a young player who's just put in a massive shift to try and get us back into or not back into the game at that point. It was level game state at that point, but to try and get us a bit more on top in the game. He's just given everything out of possession, and then we go, right, let him have the ball. He can be the player that does stuff for them, whilst he's got cramp and he can barely get himself around the pitch. So just a couple of notes there, and I think the only other thing would just be, let's just, when we get through, Kudus on the turn, Bowen on the turn around the box, Ferguson on the turn, can we just take a beat, guys? Just take a beat, let's, it's not, don't shoot immediately from 30 yards every single time we get into those positions. Have some consideration for who the goalkeeper is. Good shot stopper, especially from range. Let's try and work something here rather than just whacking it immediately as soon as we get within any kind of sight of goal. Maybe that is indicative of a performance where it has been really tough for us to sustain pressure, has been really tough for us to sustain momentum and possession in good areas, because forwards have been starved of service, and then it's like, this is the first chance I've had in 15-20 minutes to get anywhere near the box, and I want to have a pop straight away. But just a little bit more calmness in those moments might have helped us a bit, I think. Cool. So if some of the things that we did in the second half helped us to be a little bit better, but not enough better to win the game, I think it was a fair result. I think ultimately in a game of such fine margins, if you find a big moment of quality and you get away with a cheeky foul, then yeah, fair play. I think you've done enough to go and get the winner. I think there were other moments, frankly, where Newcastle should have done so much better than they did. They had plenty of breakaway opportunities where they could have done significantly better, frankly, and created a lot more in the game themselves. But if we're to look at the whole 90 and kind of sum up the things that we learnt from this match, we've talked about the main one. And I think in summary, it's that against man-to-man, high-intensity pressure, this particular shape with these players, without a target man forward, without Lucas Paqueta, without maybe someone like a Crescencio Somerville playing as a wing-back, someone who's got that real attacking upside in one of those slots in the wing-back positions, we might find ourselves in a bit of a difficult position, neither pressing successfully nor possessing the ball successfully, which is never a place you want to be.
Yeah, it's not ideal when you put it like that, is it?
No.
Not ideal at all. And I think the worrying thing is that I look at when that might change, and I'm like, well, some of it ain't coming back. Some of it ain't coming back until the summer. And then I'm looking at Ferguson as the outball option, and I've just really been massively underwhelmed by anything he's tried to do in terms of bringing the ball down if it's a long ball. He's not. He looks more physical, but I don't think he is actually that much more physical than a Bowen or a Kudus in terms of the way he challenges aerials. He's been pretty poor under the high ball for me. And then Fulkrug, again, A, who knows when he's going to be back, and B, also still yet to be convinced about his ability to operate as a target forward. So, yeah, raises some question marks for me about sort of how we move forward, because if you're looking at the squad and going, well, I don't know, even if we have all those players back, if this works, then do you just sort of try and start to think about different ways to work? And I guess that's where Paquetá comes in, right? It's maybe we don't have to be so reliable on the long ball if we can actually have someone that helps link, and then we can do the sort of keep it on the deck and play around. And then I look at those players that we've just referenced and I go, actually, yeah, I can see how Ferguson could help with that by dropping in and then playing runners in behind. And I can see how Fulkrug can come and do the sort of stuff that he was doing at Dortmund, where he was feeding the likes of Adeyemi and Donyell Marlon. So, yeah, that's sort of the positive trajectory, because I think any more sort of long ball stuff, it's just not really going to work for me.
I think it's unlikely to work with the players that we currently have available. I think Fulkrug could be a bit of a difference maker there, because, yeah, I think there were some signs when he was fit. I mean, I was quite happy with some of the work that he did when he was fit. I really liked the brief cameo we got when he came back the first time before he got injured again. So it's just about whether we can get him in a position to actually run around without doing a bunch of muscle injuries within about 10 minutes. Because if we can do that, then he might be able to make an impact for us as a target forward when we are forced to go long a bit more. I think my big point now is this was bad. This was a bad game. It didn't feel good. It wasn't fun to watch. Performance in itself, like we say, wasn't horrendous, but we weren't able to compete in terms of finding that moment on the ball in the same way that Newcastle were. And we also weren't able to compete in terms of finding that press breaking progression in the way that Newcastle were. So, yeah, problems, absolutely. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, though. And I think we spoke about that earlier. Not every team is Newcastle. And the big thing for me is that Newcastle are a really good side. It doesn't mean that I think we automatically concede defeat and we should expect to lose. I wasn't going into this game thinking that we should expect to lose. I thought we were in a good position to be competitive here. And I think when we reflect on the actual outcomes in the game, the fact that it was 1-0, it did take a moment of brilliant quality from Harvey Barnes. It took Alvarez and Skull switching off at the back post, Kilman getting fouled, and Guimaraes crashing the box with the perfect timing to score, to make a 1-0 game. I think shows how, even though it might not have been the most fun game to watch and the performance might not have been as good as we might have hoped, the players that we have and the shape that we're playing at the moment is really, really, really helping us to kind of limit variance and limit the kind of mad variability of outcomes that we maybe previously saw under Lopetegui, where generally things would go quite badly wrong, but on the odd occasion they might go quite well. In the current environment that we have with the players that we're playing, I think we're quite good spoilers in some way, and make games difficult, and make games about moments. And although we didn't find them here, I think we have a lot of really good players that in other games, against other opposition, on other days, because performances, this sort of slight variation between not quite so good and really good, actually I don't think is particularly massive in this shape with these players. I think with Bowen and Kudus, particularly Bowen on the front line, I think there are many games like this where we'll be the team that finds the moment. And if Souček converts the early chance, and this is a really, really fundamental point for me when it comes to understanding the shape, the system, how it all works. If we get to play from positive game state, I can't see any situation other than a West Ham win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree, because the system is inherently a limiter, right? The whole purpose of the system is to limit opportunities for the opposition, limit them to low quality opportunities. Obviously they do end up with a high quality chance, but I think generally, as we said, we did a very good job of defending as a cohesive unit, as a team. The understanding was good, the sort of largely implementation of the game plan was good, albeit in moments it didn't necessarily work. I think generally the ideas were there, and I think, yeah, as you say, you'll come up against other teams. I mean, looking ahead even to the next game, right? You look at Everton, shape-wise, it might not be massively different. I probably expect that Moyes will see a 4-1-4-1 in some way, in the same way that we did with Newcastle, but it's unlikely.
More of a 4-2-3-1, right? He's going to play one off the striker. That's generally what he does.
Yeah. But even still, it's not massively dissimilar. It's just going to be deeper, and it's definitely not going to be a man-to-man press.
They will press, though. They've been good at pressing under Moyes so far. Everton, I've been impressed with the way that they have pressed when they've gone.
Jeez, Moyes has found the press. Come on. Bro's finally found the press. But no, it'll be interesting, and I think, yeah, as you say, it's probably not what every fan wants to hear, because I think every fan dreams of watching their team beat everyone 4-0 every week, of course. But if you can keep yourself in the game, then you've always got a chance of winning it. And I think that's ultimately what Potter's come in. He's appraised the situation. He's gone, I've got XYZ player out. I'm inheriting a squad that have just conceded 20 goals in the last 9 Premier League games. He's come in. He's now overseen 9 games, and he's only conceded 9. So he's fixed the defence and cut the leakage in half. So, well, even better than half. And I think that's a completely reasonable and sensible thing to do, especially when you're sort of already safe. He's probably just working out who can do what, who can I rely on going into next season. These are my ideas, these are my principles. Okay, I've tried to press with the 8s today in the same way that I used to do at Brighton, and I've quickly learned that with these personnel, I'm not going to be able to do it. So add to the shopping list 1 or 2 central midfielders that can run very quickly. And that is what this season's kind of all about. So whilst it's not going to bring around super exciting or really amazing results, albeit the Arsenal win was obviously very welcome, now that we're in that position, this is exactly what I would be doing if I was Potter. I think the pressure is off. So try and experiment, try and work out what you need and attack next season. Because it's a privileged position to be in, quite frankly. There's teams that have replaced their manager and are in a dogfight from day one. But luckily, because we picked up important points here or there, including at the Emirates, then, yeah, he's earned that privilege. So I'm not going to berate him for not trying to beat Newcastle 3-0 at home when they're a Champions League team.
Yeah, look, I think the important thing, again, to understand is just the gap is so small between the kind of game that we had against Arsenal and the kind of game that we got against Newcastle. I don't think there's a massive gap between how those things happen, and that's enabled by us playing in this way. I don't think that makes it particularly fun.
No. Bro, it's Alvarez, Ward-Prowse, Souček midfield 3. There's nothing fun about it.
It's not fun. and we have to accept that. And I suppose that I think points to kind of where we are. I think that's a good summary of a squad that maybe wasn't perfectly put together.
It's good management, right? It's good management. Lopetegui came in, looked at the squad and went, I've got this system. I don't know if these players necessarily could do it, but I'm going to try it. And we all saw where that led. Potter's come in and gone, okay, I've got this system. I've got these ideas. I don't think the players can do it. So I'm actually just going to try and do something that I think the players can do, which is defend well, defend as a team, something they've got a history and track record of having done well under different management, and gone, right, let's focus on that for now. And then I'll try and do stuff as and when I can. But go on.
Yeah, I just was going to say, I saw on Sky Sports, they were talking after the game, sort of how we've had the lowest number of shots, I think shots on target per game since Potter's come in. And I thought it was interesting in a way, because I think, they talked about defending first and said that, it's the main thing that he's had to address is the defence. Do you think that's really the focus? I think it's like, and then they talked about the shots coming down. It's like, everything's coming down. That's what we're doing. We're trying to bring everything down. We're trying to bring all of that stuff down to sort of a much lower level. So it's like, right, okay, well, not having to deal with this bonkers, hardly, difficult to control thing where maybe there is a lot of up and down for Edson Alvarez and for Thomas Soucek and for other players. Let's control it all. Let's make it a little bit easier. Let's control where the game is played. And, and either that's played sort of middle third and our third, and we'll break out and be effective on the break, or it's played middle third and their third, and we're going to control the ball and we're going to sit on it and we're not going to force chances. And either way, whether it's which one of those it is, we know that it's not going to be 2-3 either way, 3-4 either way. It's going to be 1-2, and that we can control and that we can deal with, and that we always know is what I said after the game. You're going to get a couple of these situations where you're never quite in a game, but you're also never out of it either. And I think that just goes with the territory. I think that's going to be part of what we experience from here on. And it's just learning through those processes and saying, okay, what are the small things that we can change to make that better next time? What do we need to add to this to make it better next time? And where are the weaknesses in the group, and how can we help patch those up and improve them? Because not everything, let's be realistic, not everything is going to be addressed in the summer transfer window. I think there's a feeling right now that the squad has weaknesses and it will all be solved after the summer. I don't think it's going to be quite so quick. Transfers have a 50-60% hit rate a lot of the time, so I'm sure we will try to address most of the weaknesses in the squad. I think it's unlikely that we will succeed in addressing all of them all within one window. So I feel so terrible doing this. There's a process by which we have to just kind of slowly get better. There really is
a process now as well. We've really bought into the process.
Yeah.
We've got Macaulay, we've got Potter. Like, come on, we're one Dan Ashraf away from being the process.
Yeah, quite literally. So yeah. Yeah. There'll be steps back, but I think we can see the general direction of travel, and I'm really hoping that that we don't kind of completely upend everything that we've done very well with the reintroduction of Paqueta, which will obviously continue that conversation now on Extra Time. Patreon.com/Analytics United if you want to join us. We'd love to see you there. There's loads of people who've joined us recently. It's been really, really, really lovely on the Patreon all year, frankly. I've had a great time chatting to people in the Discord, chatting to people in the Patreon DMs, chatting to people in the comments, and going back and forth through the Q&A show. So, if you have questions after the show, if you have questions when you've watched the game, you think, well, why did that happen? Why did we see that? We do a whole Q&A show on there as well, where we go through every single question every single week. So we'd love to see you over there. And if we don't see you over there, we will see you next week after the Everton game, where I feel like there is a potential for things to go very, very well, or for us to be in a situation, Cal, with some very unhappy people. Whatever it is, I look forward to confronting that next week with you and with all of you listening. And if you do join us, then yeah, we'll see you on the Q&A, we'll see you in PMP, we'll see you in the preview, we'll see you on Euro Review. We've got 500 players this season around Europe. We've scouted 500 plus players. So yeah, if you want to comb through the catalogue, you know where to go. But yeah, thank you, Cal, and thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.